The Boston Bruins should be hanging a big old help wanted sign at TD Garden because outside of David Pastrnak, I'm not convinced they know who's going to be scoring for this team.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I'm your host, Ian McLaren, and this is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Today is Tuesday, August 19th. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine. In fact, your first listen every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And on today's podcast, we are going to discuss who is scoring for this team. We can rely on David Pastrnak for 40, 50, hey, maybe even 60 goals once again. But after that, there's some real concerns about who's putting the puck in the net. And I'm going to discuss some PTO options as well as some guys who need to step up internally. Today's podcast is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Before we get into it today, a quick reminder, you can find the podcast on social media at LockedNHL Bruins. And you can find me, my hockey thoughts and dad jokes at Ian C. McLaren. I'm a lifelong Boston Bruins fan. Been covering this team for various outlets for 20 years. And also, please do hit that subscribe button on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube if you have not already. All right, so the Boston Bruins this upcoming season, we know will be led in scoring by none other than David Pastrnak. Coming off a 43-goal season, 63 assists to go along with that for 106 total points. Now, following that, there's not a huge gap between Pastrnak and the second leading scorer for this team last year. And that was Morgan Geekie, who had 33 goals in 77 games, 57 total points. So he's like 50 points back of Pasta, but only 10 goals. So it's easy to think, well, of course, Geekie will replicate that and add that first line scoring that the Bruins need. We're not even at the second line yet. There's still questions about the first line because as good as Morgan Geekie was last season, and as much as he was rewarded with a new contract heading into this season, and deservedly so, there's some questions about his shot volume as well as his shooting percentage. When it comes to total shots on goal last season, Morgan Geekie ranked 4th on the team behind Pastrnak, Brad Marchand, who had 175 shots through 61 games. Elias Lindholm had more shots than Morgan Geekie, and then we had Geekie with 150 shots. 33 goals on 150 shots equals a 22% shooting success rate. And that is well above average and more than likely to fall this upcoming season. Players come in are usually around, well, Pasta is at 13%, Marchand was at 12%, Lindholm at 11.2%. So he had more shots than Geekie, but a lower success rate, keeping his goal total at 17. So unless Geekie really elevates his shot totals, which is not out of the realm of possibility, considering he likely will get more average ice time per game. He only had 16.55 last season, could get up to 17 plus if he's playing top line minutes, maybe 18 a night. Then this is a guy who could indeed be able to sustain his goal total to the point where it's around 20, 25. But that's still going to be a drop off from last season. At any rate, the commitment that the Bruins made to Geekie and his chemistry with David Pastrnak suggests that they believe he can indeed replicate some semblance of that 33-goal season. I'm not convinced it's going to be as high unless indeed his shot totals go up. Maybe he gets some more power play time as well. Only 4 of his goals came on the power play. So if he's able to get some more time on the man advantage, that could offset the regression that's likely to come at 5-on-5. So you have Pastrnak, Geekie, and then your third leading scorer last season in terms of goals is no longer on the team. That would be Brad Marchand, who had 21 goals, 26 assists, 47 points in 61 games for the Bruins before being traded to the Florida Panthers. We'll talk about who could fill that void. You have a guy like Victor Olofsson who could conceivably replicate the numbers that were posted by Brad Marchand before he left last season. He had 15 goals last year in 67 games for the Edmonton Oilers. He has had a 26-goal season, 34-goal season in 58 games, but that was back in 2018, 2019, 29-goal season, 31-goal season, but it's been a while. He's had some injury issues, unable to stay healthy, and didn't quite get the bump that was expected upon moving to a team like the Edmonton Oilers. We look at last season again. You had Elias Lindholm, who came in 4th in scoring with 17 goals. Charlie Coyle with 15 goals before being sent to Colorado. What a miserable season he had. 15 goals, 7 assists for the Bruins last year. And they still got what they got. That's pretty remarkable. Pavel Zacha only had 14 goals last year, followed by Justin Brazeau, Cole Koepke, and Trent Frederick, all 3 of whom have moved on. So who exactly is going to score for this team? You're hoping for a bump from Casey Middlestat, who only had 4 goals in 18 games, and talk about elevated shooting percentage. He only had 23 shots on goal in those 18 games. You're going to need a lot more from him if they're going to roll him out as your second line center. Pavel Zacha could improve his goal totals a little bit, but he's never been known as a huge goal scorer. In fact, his career high is 21, which he set in the previous 2 seasons with the Boston Bruins. So you're not going to get a huge bump there. You might get 20 goals out of Victor Olofsson. Lindholm, perhaps in an elevated role, could return to the 20-goal mark. But after that, it's not looking very promising. And there's some real question marks about the scoring on this team. And that was a huge deficiency last season. And they went out and signed Michael Eyssimont, who isn't known as a major goal scorer. He only had 9 last season in 77 games. And that was 2 off his career high. His career high is 11 a couple seasons ago with the Tampa Bay Lightning. Sean Kuraly, not a huge goal scorer. He was brought in as well. You have, we'll talk about some of the guys who could make the jump later on from the minors or guys who were brought in, but really it's pretty lean for this team in terms of goal scoring and some real questions about who is going to put the puck in the net beyond David Pastrnak. Morgan Geekie, you can hopefully count on 25 goals, but then after that, is there anybody who's going to score 20? That's a huge question mark for this team. We'll look at some PTO options as well as some guys who could step up internally. here as the podcast continues. Honestly, most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNHL. Thank you so much again for making Locked On Bruins part of your daily routine, free and available on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Let's talk about some PTO options that the Bruins could explore. These are guys who are still unrestricted free agents who could bring some offensive upside to the table. And speaking of PTOs, there's word this morning that the St. Louis Blues have signed Milan Lucic to a PTO. We all remember Lucic was a member of the Boston Bruins in 2023. 2 assists in 4 regular season games. He took an indefinite leave of absence from the team and entered the NHLPA Player Assistance Program after some domestic abuse charges were laid that were eventually dropped. He has since completed the program and been reinstated by the NHL. If you look at his Instagram, seems like he is on the road to recovery, perhaps even reconciliation. But I'm kind of glad the Bruins didn't go down this route and try to do another reunion. We'll see how he fares with the St. Louis Blues. I don't know if he has much left in the tank at this point. Speaking of PTOs, though, there are some guys who are available who could perhaps add a bit of spark to the Bruins. They do have currently about $2.2 million in available cap space, so there's not much to work with, pending whatever they do with Joonas Korpisalo, who I discussed on yesterday's podcast. If you missed that, go check it out. Whether they buy him out eventually or bury him in Providence, there are some routes they can take with him in order to free up some cap space. The best available free agent in terms of goals scored last season is Jack Roslovic, who is, for whatever reason, still available. He had a pretty good season, 22 goals, 17 assists for Carolina last season, and still available as an unrestricted free agent. There's been talk that he could sign with the Maple Leafs, probably too expensive for the Bruins at this point, but he's a guy who could offer some offense. And he's only 28 years old. If you're looking for pure goal scoring the guy to maybe look for, and the guy who has the highest point per game average among available UFAs right now is Victor Olofsson. He had a cap hit of $1,075,000 last season, 15 goals, 14 assists in only 56 games, and had 0.76 goals per 60 last season. And that is some pretty good offense for a guy who was only making $1 million. You also have Jacob Vrana, who is a unrestricted free agent. He scored, only 9 goals, 5 assists in 39 games last season. But he did have 1.28 goals per 60 could also provide some cheap offense, low risk, potentially high reward. This is a guy who has scored 24 goals. He's got a 25 goal season on his record in only 69 games a few seasons ago. And last year with the Capitals and Predators, 9 goals in those 39 games. He's been banged up, hasn't played a ton of games over the seasons. He's bounced around between Washington, Detroit, but he has the pedigree there to score goals. So those are 3 guys you could easily look at right now. Roslovic, probably a bit too expensive, but Vrana for sure. And also Victor Olofsson, who had that 0.52 goals per game last season. A guy that I love, who has been often injured, but who has tremendous upside when healthy, is a guy like Robby Fabbri. And I mean, way back during his draft year, I was so high on Fabbri. I was hoping that the Bruins would snag him when he was still available in 2014. He was taken 21st overall by the St. Louis Blues. Thankfully, the Bruins ended up with a bit of a better pick that year in our boy David Pastrnak. But that's how high I was on Robby Fabbri that year. Maybe some Guelph bias there, but this is a guy who can put up some points if healthy, and that's the problem. He rarely is. 44 games last year for the Ducks, 8 goals. Previous to that, he had 18 goals in 68 games for the Red Wings in 2023-24. 17 goals in 56 games, 10 goals in 30 games, 14 goals in 52 games. So this is a guy who can put the puck in the net. He's got tremendous offensive upside, but it's just the health that is keeping him back. Still a very exciting player and a guy that I would certainly throw a PTO at in order to see what he could do for the Boston Bruins, if indeed he is and can stay healthy. There's some veteran options like Cam Atkinson, who didn't really pop last year with the Tampa Bay Lightning. After that, Kevin LeBanc maybe could be an option. There's not a ton of forward. Craig Smith, could you look at making a reunion? I don't know if you're going to get a ton out of him. The guys I would look at for sure would be Olofsson, Vrana, and Fabbri. Those are 3 options. Guys who are still fairly young. Vrana's 29. Olofsson's 30. Fabbri's 29. These are guys who have offensive upside and who could bring a spark to this team in training camp via PTO. Like, you're banking right now on Geekie, Lindholm, Pastrnak, and then Zacha, Mittelstadt, and Arvidsson. If someone falls out of that top 6, who's taking that spot? Maybe it's one of the younger guys that jump up and claim their spot on the Boston Bruins and don't let go. And we'll discuss those options here coming up in a moment. But you need that kind of competition in training camp and those safety nets in case something goes wrong. And right now, the Bruins just do not have that scoring depth. And I'm deeply concerned about who is going to score for this team beyond the top line. I could see Lindholm getting 20, Geekie 25, Pasta at least 40. But then, again, Mittelstadt needs to shoot more. Zacha's not really a known sniper. Arvidsson, you're kind of banking on him, finding his form. And then after that, you've got a bunch of bottom 6 guys who are not known for offensive prowess. Who among Bruins hopefuls could step up and add some scoring? We'll discuss those internal options here as the podcast continues. So this past summer, or this past July, Don Sweeney went out and signed a couple guys who could indeed provide a spark for the Boston Bruins in terms of scoring. And that would be Matej Blumel, who had 39 goals in 67 games last season for the Texas Stars to lead the AHL in goal scoring. Then you also have Alex Steeves, who had 36 goals in 59 games for the Toronto Marlies to rank second in AHL scoring. Both of those guys were signed to NHL contracts. They would have to be sent through waivers in order to be assigned to Providence. And the fact that Boston was able to scoop them both, nice little coup there by Don Sweeney. But say they impress in training camp and the Bruins decide they don't have the space, they would have to go through waivers in order to be sent down. And those guys could easily be plucked on those short-term deals. So it would be important for the Bruins to give those guys every chance of success, similar to Michael DiPietro. You don't want to lose those guys on waivers for nothing. I would much rather try to send Sean Corrali down or Michael Esimont or even John Beecher if you need to make room for Blumel or Steeves, because they have some real potential there as scoring threats. Now, yes, it's much different going from the AHL to the NHL, and that doesn't always translate. See Georgi Merkulov as Exhibit A. Led the Providence Bruins in scoring for the past few seasons, but hasn't been able to take advantage of the, albeit brief, times that he's been up with the Boston Bruins. He's another guy that could very well be able to step up and add some scoring pop on this team. Same with Fabian Lysell, who was similar to Robby Fabbri, 21st overall pick, a guy who scored his first NHL goal late last season after an extended run up with the Bruins, in which he really did seem to find his stride and seem to be able to, adapt a bit more to the NHL game. Hopefully he's able to put it together in training camp and seize what could be his final opportunity. Fraser Minten, Matt Poitras. I mean, all these prospects for the Bruins, you don't really see a huge untapped offensive upside. James Higgins clearly will be an elite 1A center who could put up high-end numbers, but we don't necessarily see that from Poitras, Minten. Merkulov's a question mark. We had hoped it would come from Lysell. So these are all guys with potential to contribute, but I don't know if we can pencil them in for 10, 15, 20 goals. That's a bit of a stretch. You're going to need some offense from Tanner Jeannot, Mark Kastelik, maybe Marat Husnudinov is able to step it up a little bit and have a bit of a breakout. But internally, it's pretty thin still. And that's why you should maybe look at some PTO options like Vrana, Fabbri, or Olofsson, who I mentioned earlier. Steeves and Blumel will have a chance to impress, as will Lysell, Merkulov, Minten, Poitras. But A, they're going to have to beat out some more established veterans in order to seize a spot. And B, there's really no guarantee that they are going to put up the kind of numbers that will propel the Bruins back into playoff contention. Another factor, though, could be some offense from the blue line. Of course, Charlie McAvoy missed a bunch of time last season. Hampus Lindholm missed a bunch of time. They did not really get much from the back end outside of Mason Lohrei chipping in here and there with some offense, 33 points to lead the team in scoring from the blue line last season. But beyond that, there wasn't much generated from the blue line in terms of offense. McAvoy did have 7 goals in 50 games, so maybe he gets to double digits. Zadorov had 4 goals in 81 games. Maybe he can chip in a bit. Not get much from Andrew Peeke. Lindholm had 3 goals in 17 games, so in a full season, maybe he chips in a bit more. Maybe Henri Jokiharju or Victor Soderstrom are able to chip in a bit. But again, I think it's really going to be a stretch for the Bruins to expand or evolve offensively this upcoming season. They're going to be reliant on defensive systems, on a healthy defensive core featuring McAvoy and Lindholm, a rebound from Jeremy Swayman, and try to eke out some 2-1, 3-2 decisions here, or get the point, push it to a shootout, unless they're able to add more offense before training camp starts in the form of a PTO. And I mean, even those guys aren't guaranteed to contribute, but you have to at least explore the options. If you have the St. Louis Blues throwing out a PTO to Milan Lucic, then the Bruins can respond in kind with taking a former Blue on a PTO in Robby Fabbri or Jacob Vrana or Victor Olofsson, right? There's no risk to it. It's a PTO. You're not paying the guy anything. You're not committing. Bring him in, see what he can do. All right, that's today's episode of Locked On Boston Bruins. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. Please do hit me up in the comments or on social if you have any feedback or suggestions for the show. PTOs, agree, disagree with my stance on the scoring. Am I being too harsh on some of the Bruins penciled in the lineup, or am I going too easy on them? Are we really going to struggle more than I'm anticipating? Do check out the Locked On NHL podcast next for league-wide news from our local experts. It's available on YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. Just search up Locked On NHL. And it's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Please do take care of yourselves, take care of each other. We'll talk to you here again on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins.